Who here likes going to the movies?
Yeah.
Woo.
Yes.
Pretty much everybody, okay. Recently, we have seen a lot of the same thing. Sequels and remakes. Now, most people would agree that for the most part, the remakes we have been getting over the past 10 to 15 years have for the most part sucked. Now, there are some exclusions of those which did not suck. But let's start out by saying they don't all suck. And let's talk about the top 3 worst remakes. And this isn't just my opinion, this is the opinion. I've talked to plenty of movie reviewers. I talk to people every day about remakes almost. Me and my friends chat about remakes and how bad they are on Facebook almost every night. And we all agree that this was one of the worst. Halloween 2. Now, this is actually interesting because Halloween 2 was such a piece of garbage. And the original part of this series, Halloween, the first remake, was actually one of the ones that was actually better than all the other shitty horror remakes that we've had. And basically, they went in there and they completely changed Michael Myers. They completely changed Dr. St. Loomis. They took the 2 most important characters of the entire series and gave them a total workover. Not only from what they used to be in the original series, but what they used to be in the film that came before this one. Next, we have the worst remake, number 2, Friday the 13th. Anytime you try to take a movie franchise like Friday the 13th and you put, well, here's the biggest mistake. Jason Voorhees was not the killer in the original Friday the 13th. So why should he be the killer in the Friday the 13th remake? Well, he shouldn't be. But they decided, oh, let's just go ahead and clump the first 3 movies together into one film. That right there is why it sucked. The only reason I went was because I had a free ticket to go see it, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm not doing anything else today. I'll go watch it. And it's about the only time I ever got up out of the theater and walked out. It was that bad. The next film, I didn't even go to see it in the theaters because they did the cardinal rule of remaking a horror movie. They broke that cardinal rule and changed who the killer was. That film, of course, was Prom Night. In the original Prom Night, it was the female lead's brother. The female lead was played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Her brother was the killer. In the Prom Night remake, it was a teacher, which that would be like, oh, let's make Michael Myers a chick in the remake. That'd be almost as bad as doing that. I mean, A Night to Die For. Yeah. If I go to see that, I hope I die that night, because that's just awful. And this movie would have been better served as a sequel than it would have a remake, because then it at least would have been like, okay, it's just a new story with basically the same thing. Guy comes and kills people on prom night. That would have been okay. But no, they had to make it a remake. And then tell you, oh, guess what? We fucked up and made the killer different. And they announced that in the trailer. So, this movie made about the same amount of money that it did back in the 70s when it originally came out, which is pretty bad because movie tickets are about 4 times as much now as they were back then. Now, we have had some good remakes. 3 of those are The Omen, which was almost exactly like the original, except for a few additions that they changed. The Pink Panther, which was hilarious both times. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein with Robert De Niro, which is actually my favorite installment of the Frankensteins. Now, Frankenstein is one of those movies that I feel should be remade every now and then, just to reintroduce it to the newer generation. Every 20 to 30 years, films like Frankenstein, King Kong, and Dracula seem to get remakes. And deservingly so, because they are certain films you can remake and get away with it. Certain films are so iconically classic in their original form that it's just why even bother. Now we're going to talk about the Elite Club. And that Elite Club is, of course, remakes that have surpassed the originals. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, this is probably the most controversial one of whether it surpassed the original or not. My reasoning for it surpassing the original is they actually picked up the book and read the book, as opposed to the 70s where they just did whatever they wanted to with it. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is actually really based off the book. They actually picked up the book and took the stuff in the book. The dad was in the book. The Oompa Loompas were creepy as heck in the book, and had the creepy ass songs with the actual children's name in the book. And a lot of people do. This is the most controversial one because either people loved it or they hated it because they loved the original so much. Those of us who had to read the book 4 or 5 times in school know that this is clearly the better film if you want to go off of the book. Next is Halloween. The Halloween remake actually surpassed the original for one main reason. It showed how Michael in the asylum, it showed how he escaped, it showed all these plot holes from the original story that were missing to make the Halloween franchise actually even more spectacular than it already is. We never saw him interacting with Laurie as a baby, which we got to see in this one, which was one of the most key elements that made me love this one so much, and then get so pissed off with the second one. Now, this I actually got to see this weekend, and I gotta say, this is by far the best horror remake I have ever seen. They modernized it and kept all the key elements of the original Carrie in it. I watched the original before that, and then I went and watched the new one, and I was like, for the love of God, if they don't have Plug It Up in this movie, I'm gonna walk right out. And sure enough, they had it, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit here and watch the rest of the movie. Because that was just like the most memorable scene from the whole first movie for me, because it was so vicious. They did. King Kong. Now, not only do I agree that King Kong is one of the best remakes, it is critically known as one of the best remakes ever made, because it was the first remake to ever be nominated for Best Picture. Now, the next one is actually a trilogy. Does anybody know what trilogy is the #1 best remake of all time?
Lord of the Rings.
I already told you. What?
Lord of the Rings.
No, because that's not a remake.
Batman?
Yes. The Dark Knight trilogy. Now, every single Dark Knight trilogy was film of the Dark Knight trilogy was well received by the Batman fans. It was well received by fans of the old series. It was pretty much a global iconic hotline for the past 10 years. And each film just got better and better. The best being The Dark Knight 2, which was The Dark Knight, which was the second film to be nominated for Best Picture, and it was actually the second or third sequel to be nominated for Best Picture. Now, I have talked about the good, the bad, and the superior. What are your guys' thoughts on remakes and what makes them good and what makes them bad?
What are your views on Child's Play?
Child's Play has not been redone yet, so I have no personal
Chucky.
views on that. It has not been redone yet.
Who was the killer in the first Friday the 13th?
Jason Voorhees' mother.
Really?
Yes.
Hmm.
He was not the killer until the second one.
What exactly was your definition for what made a remake better or worse? Was it how many awards it won, nominations, or money, or your opinion?
Basically, what I thought of the film and what I've heard about other people's opinions.
So feedback?
Yes, feedback.
Most of the remakes, did they have like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory that had a book to go along with it? Did they have anything to go back on?
Most of the remakes had the original films to go back on. They just failed to actually, a lot of them failed to actually do the research. And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory actually did their research. And the only reason Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for the Willy Wonka wasn't actually based off the book in the first one is because at that time we did not have the technology to do everything correctly for a Willy Wonka movie.
Do you think the whole point of a remake though is to revisit the same idea but to make it different, to like explore new ways?
Exactly, and that's why I love the Carrie remake, because that's exactly what they did. They revisited the original, they kept the key elements of it in there, and they remodernized it. Like, for instance, the shower scene, one of the girls actually posted it on the internet. which is something back then they wouldn't even have thought of doing. Anybody else? Alright, thank you all for your thoughts and